So this is a discussion of how geoheritage plays into the arts community. We have a really strong geoheritage here, exemplified by the mines, and they make a huge impact on the arts community. The beginning of this is with Native Americans who came here maybe 9,000 years ago and started to find uses for the copper. And at first they made useful objects, but then they began to make decorative and beautiful objects, transferring themselves into the arts community. And this kind of activity continues on today, through things like arts fairs. And the percentage of art that occurs in these local fairs is largely from geoheritage, objects that play into geoheritage. I have some examples of some of these now. Photography is one of the most important ones, and here Steve Brim is one of the deans of the local photography industry. And of course, lots of these are shoreline images. For artists themselves, one of the most famous is Ladislav Hanka, who does etchings. And many of his images emphasize the shorelines, even both above and below water. Here's an image from Clyde Mikola of pebbles and driftwood on a shoreline, part of the imagery that we take for granted here with so much shoreline available. Pottery is another example of how geomaterials, soils and clays, and make their way into useful objects. And Ed Gray is a Native American artist who makes beautiful examples of pottery. Of course, minerals themselves are part of the story here. Susan Robinson has made a career out of beautiful renditions of art. Here's an art of minerals. She also does rocks, and she's an editor of a museum of art run by the Mineralogical Record, which is a prominent journal of mineralogy. Well, of course, all parts of the local community, including mine shafts and mine buildings, play their way into the local artists. Here's a old painting from Alden Steck, and one of the copper miners on strike by Jan Manico. These are just examples of the rich amount of art that comes with geoheritage. Every year, the Community Arts Center runs a shaft exhibition, which brings forth much art on the local buildings and high shaft houses. And of course, the landscapes here are a way in which artists and geologists can get together. Here's a diagram from Smithwick Island that shows how a triangular motif plays into local landscapes. These are the beds on Isle Royal, the individual lava flows dipping back to the south toward the Keweenaw Peninsula, defining the syncline that has developed there. Other artists like Randy Wakeham do live art on the shoreline. Here he's used driftwood sculpture to mimic wave action on the shoreline. Wonderful, creative live art. And of course, the local rock has been heavily used in architecture, particularly the Jacobsville sandstone, which is world famous and is recognized by the United Nations as a global heritage stone resource and supported by a wonderful book by Catherine Eckert about sandstone architecture. Very important geoheritage contribution and also beautiful art. The buildings that were the result of this are located on college campuses and in cities all around the eastern United States, and of course, within the local area. Here's the Astoria Hotel from New York, for example, a Jacobsville sandstone building, along with the magnificent firehouse from Calumet. Well, local stone is also used in Masonic efforts or Mason efforts. Here's the C&H Library and the public bath in Calumet with the statue of Alexander Agassiz draped in snow in front of it, which is right at the park headquarters in Calumet. A magnificent building with special masonry. The black rocks are the local basalt, and they make a prominent form, a prominent portion of the rock that is put together in this building. There are many books, very rich legacy of books, and a lot of these have direct connection with geoheritage and the sandstone architecture book, which I already mentioned by Catherine Eckert. Susan Robinson's book about Is This an Agate? With lots of her beautiful drawings in it. Magnificent photography book by Steve Brim about Copper Harbor. And then two historic books, the Copper Country Journal by Philip Mason, reproducing the journal of a miner at the Cliff Mine, and Larry Langton's book, one of many, about the mining history from a social science point of view. This is just a tiny touch of some of the better books that are available. Music has a history in the local area as well. This is from the Pine Mountain Music Festival of 2011, an original opera called Rockland, which was written by a Finnish composer about a labor story and labor murders in Rockland during the period in the early 1900s. It was a wonderful result and a huge event for performances both in Finland and in the Copper Country. There's a local radio show, the Red Jacket Jamboree, which revives the spirit of the Prairie Home Companion, but with the theme of the local geoheritage repeated often. Here's one about red hot lava. And this event is aired on Michigan Public Radio and sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts and Arts and Cultural History, Council for Arts and Cultural History of Michigan. Michigan Tech has a wonderful activity in this area of music in the mines. Libby Meyer has been a leader in the coordination of these efforts and to promote rock music, real rock music, not rock and roll, but real rock music. There's also an effort at something called Keweenaw Soundscapes, where natural sounds, the sounds of the lake and the sounds of the air and the wind and the branches of the trees rustling in the wind and the animals, which are being systematically recorded and displayed with high quality audio materials. And there's a lot of interest in this type of work. It's also done by percussion artists. Here's an effort by Carrie Viola, who's a percussionist from Northern Michigan University. And she's playing on Lake Superior ice, what's called a ice-lifting. And this was part of a concert coordinated by Libby Meyer and performed at the Rosé Center. So a wonderful event for all of us. Professor Stephen Rush from the University of Michigan has performed in the local mines. Here's a picture from a concert on October 13th, 2018 at the Delaware Mine, an underground mine near Copper Harbor. This is some video from that performance and some of the music that was performed in this environment. Here, we're walking into the attic toward the stove where the concert is to be held. The sound in the mind is different. It doesn't come to you in faithful form in this video, but it at least gives you an idea. Here's the audience coming in the attic, and the stove is off to the left. The musicians have clambered up the side of the stove and lit candles. This is Stephen Rush. Needless to say, this is a unique experience. The students are part of a graduate class at the University of Michigan. Next, we are going to move to the Quincy and show you some other recent artists' activity. And this is a creative presentation by a group from the University of Chicago led by Jennifer Scapioni and many other people. It's this image that I start with is a image of the hoist house, which was done with a LiDAR system, a very unique way of looking at the image of this magnificent building. It
Zoe, Rosetti,
Variety,
Arson,
South
South Radius,
Radius,
and
and
Arson's
that
misdirects
mine
to the
to the
numinous.
north.
this is linked with poetry and musical renditions that are part of a presentation. I'm only showing you little parts of it to give you a sense of what this is like. There's an image of the big drum of the Quincy Mine hoist building and some elements of the poetry that goes with this. And it's a symbolic rendition of copper, copper mining,
Don't
and
you know each
the
plow
technology
contains
and the spirit.
2 men widow makers, compressed air drills, gang of undesirables, subjugationers,
strikers, smoke
What you
billowing
see behind is an
corn, heaven bread,
image of the
last years
stope
by constant
in the Quincy
penetration
mine,
encroaching on the reserve.
and they're examining this, so you can see the image of the stope, the laser image, and this is some symbolism and discussion of copper and its
Inside,
resources,
it's raining heavy
pennies from
metals.
heaven. This is an image of the stope,
no
a
dead
remarkable
air,
perspective
done.
of that. Well, the mine has been used one other time for musical events. Um, this is um, in late 2019 when Stephen Rush and Carrie Biolo returned and did a concert within the Hoist House. And so you can see them performing, and the audience on the right hand side below the drum. There was active participation and use of the local materials as percussion objects. And so there's an accent as part of the concert. And it's an example of how we hope to use these remarkable venues more to make music even more exciting than it's been in the past. These remarkable venues. And that's all I wanted to show you, a little rendition of how arts have resonated from the local geoheritage and what's happened in very recent years due to enthusiastic collaborators. Keep them coming.